me is what? Someone said it.
Transforming heavy metal into gold.
Transforming heavy metals into gold.
It was a science fact.
And this is actually a spiritual terminology. It's a metaphysical term. And this planet, Saturn, is actually this symbolism of turning metal into gold. Who's the metal? It's actually lead. Who's lead? Us. We're the lead. We're the heaviness. Tanisha in this example. She's stuck in her way. Mr. Pachi stuck in her way. Wouldn't turn, her head in a different direction. We get very stuck in our ways. Based on the moment of conception, we are programmed. We are programmed, people. And it takes every 7 years to start deprogramming ourselves. If we're lucky and we allow it. Every 7 years we're deprogrammed, and we are in the process of alchemy. And we take this heavy lead that's us, that's our subconscious mind, and we're slowly moving into adaptability, becoming more adaptable, becoming gold. And that is how we change. This is why this 7-year process is so important. These skinny cows that I'll tell you about in a moment, for those of you who don't know. So I want to go back to the moon because it's the same story as the Saturn. So I told you earlier, the moon. So what happens is, here's conception, and here's 7 years old. You get your 7 year, you get your first 7. Then at 14, you get your next Saturn. We're going to do that door in a second. Then at 21, you get your next Saturn. And then at 28, you get your next. And then this is back between 28 and 30 years. So it follows the same exact cycle as the moon. And the reason the moon is so important is to give us a pattern of 7, 14, 21, 28 days, because the Saturn process of death, every 7 years, you're going to get a knock on your door. It's time to die again. It's time to die. It's time to transform. It's time to adapt. It's time to let go of your control. It's time to surrender. It's time to hit the knees. Something is going to come and crack you down. You're going to get your skinny cows, which I'll talk about in a second. And this process happens at 28 to 30 years. This happens 3 times in your life. It happens 7, 14, 21, 28. But that's why you meet your father at 28 years old. From 28 to 30 it happens. From 58 to 60. And then from 88 to 90, if you're alive. You get 3 major Saturn cycles in your life. So if you're lucky, you get 3 major ones, and you can rewrite your entire life story 3 times. But every 7 years, you're basically getting knocked on the door of death, and you're being told, rewrite, rewrite, rewrite. And how do you know what you have to do? Where do you get the storyline? Take a guess.
The conception.
From the moment of conception and from your birth process. What I was saying on Tuesday is, when you are born, whatever happens in your birth, does anyone know about their birth process? What do you know?
It was 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fast. Serious like me. No wonder you want to be the youngest side D in the state.
I was early for like days, for like 10 days.
Okay, so Aniela was early. On top of being early, it was a quick delivery.
Okay.
Okay.
My mom was actually, because the doctor was not there, so there was like a student or something, and he was the one that was helping there and everything. And my mom was trying to calm him down because he was so paranoid. He was like, he didn't know what to do, and my mom was calming him down. And my mom was helping him, giving me birth, and it was just so crazy.
Okay, that's actually a myth. There's a myth where the daughter is born and then she helps give birth to the brother. So it's actually that the sister helps give birth to the brother. Do you have any Cancer in your chart? No, you don't have any Cancer in your chart. Okay, that's a poignant myth. But anyway, that would be something that we would look at. But, okay, so we've got 3 pieces of information with Aniela's birth. There's a student, it comes early, and she's in delivery for 30 minutes. What is that going to tell you about Aniela's moving into the next stages of her life?
What we see now.
Yeah, pretty much. She's a student. She values a student, or she's always helping other students. You notice that? She's sort of like the mentor with other students. She's always fast in the sense that she's got to speed up. We've seen this with her track and field? When you've been in the track and field thing, that she has to be first in the team, and that she's in a hurry. And I always joke with her that she's going to be the youngest ID ever in the state of Florida. So it's similar to me that I was born in a hurry, no anesthesia, came out really fast. People like us have to learn how to slow down. One of the lessons that we're learning in our Saturn with every 7 years is that we have to learn how to die. And what we're learning, because Saturn has to do with death, how to die, is our alchemy, how we die, how we turn into gold, is that we have to learn to slow down. In our brain, we have to learn the value of slowing down. Tanisha might need to learn the value of speeding up, because she sort of kept herself stuck.
Yeah, and
Anyone
I was
else
born
know?
early.
And you were born early?
My mom didn't know about me. I was transported and I was born early.
Okay, your mom didn't know about you, that's right, you shared that with us. So there's some information that she doesn't know, and it's repeated when she doesn't go see her aunt, and she doesn't know that her aunt isn't going to come out. So when she doesn't have all the information, she holds herself hostage. So she has to get comfortable. One of the things that she has to get comfortable is not having all the information. That's going to be one of the big things with you. You won't always have all the information, and that's one of the ways that you have to sort of learn how to die, how to change yourself, your lead into gold. You will not always have all the information, and that's one of the things that you have to get comfortable with so that you don't stagnate yourself. Anyone else know about their...
It's complicated.
Okay, what about it?
I guess her uterus was in the shape of a heart or something, so she couldn't give a natural birth.
Okay,
And
were
she
you
found
C-section?
out- Yeah,
Okay,
that's it.
but she found out what?
She found out she couldn't have natural birth, so from then on, it's all C-section.
Okay.
That's all I know about it.
So oftentimes, children that are C-section have a disconnect with their mother. The baby doesn't know psychologically that they've been born. When a baby is given natural birth, what they do is they're put on the belly of the mom and they make a connection. But when they're C-section, they're often taken to go do their thing, and they never have that initial bonding. So that's one thing. The other thing that happens oftentimes with C-section babies is that the flora, the vaginal flora that helps with like the GI, and babies can oftentimes have difficulty with like GI problems. Anything with the gastrointestinal tract, it could be like illnesses of the GI. Do you have anything like that? Okay.
I definitely
Okay.
do.
So I'm like, that's why when I get a smirk, I'm like, damn it.
Okay.
That's my damn it.
And that's oftentimes due to C-section birth. So there could be a disconnect there. So especially if your mom didn't know that she needed to have a C-section. My daughter was supposed to be a water birth, and I go to the doctor, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready for my water birth. He's like, you can't have a water birth. And I was like, what? He's like, your uterine will prolapse. And I'm like, what do you mean? You told me. He's like, no. He's like, you can't have a water birth. So I ended up having to have a C-section, which I knew about, but my daughter didn't want to come out. And they pushed and they pushed and they pushed, and I felt all of it. And finally she came out. And so I always tell her that she didn't want to come out of the cozy, and so it's sort of like she waits, and then all of a sudden, then she takes the leap. And it's like recently, she didn't want to leave home, and now she just left home. Things like that, like she makes those leaps. So it's not behind, she's actually ahead now, she left to college early, but I feel it all, and I felt every bit of her leaving to college. It's like I felt every little, pain of missing her and things like that. So these things have symbolism. But the way that we are born into the world, we tend to, when we move into our next cycle, every 7 years, that's how we tend to repeat those patterns. And in essence, we should not do that. We should, quote unquote, learn how to die and do it differently. Learn something from it. That's why these cycles bring us to our knees. That's why they're so hard, Tanisha. That's why they're not easy. They're not easy for us to adapt to. It's very difficult. I'm having a very difficult time adapting to this. It's too much loss. It's too much detachment. Anytime there's a death, whether it's figuratively or metaphorically or real, it's a very difficult thing. It's a detachment process. Next week, when we do some of the grief and death and dying theories, you'll see that one of the theories that we look at is Bowlby, which is an attachment theory. How difficult it is to detach. And so attachment and detachment has to do with grief. Okay? So the same thing that we look at the moon of every 28 days has the same thing to do with every 28 years. Does this make sense? That every 7 years, we are given a crisis. It comes knocking at the door. Okay? You have to answer, but it's a great question. It's a great question. I want you to imagine a rug. And Saturn comes, and you don't answer. And you're asleep, you drink yourself through the 2 years, and you take all the crap and you put it under the rug. You drink yourself, eat yourself, study yourself, worry yourself, whatever it is, you don't want to deal with it. Next 7 years. Louder. You don't want to deal with it again. Sweep it under the rug. More crap. Next 7 years, even louder, more crap.
You can't sleep on a rug that has
By the time the 28 years cycle, there's a myth. It's a Hercules myth, and I'll share with you in a second. So it's a very cool story that's related to this. By the time the 28-year cycle comes, the crap is so high that you have no choice. You have no choice. Something majorly big is coming because you can't hide from it anymore. Because what happens is you're closing the cycle. So you can run, you could try, but here at the end of the cycle you can't anymore. So there's this myth, it's called Hercules and the Augean stables. King Augeas was this real mean king. And he had these 3 stables full of shit. Shit that he had piled up for 28 years based on this. And it stunk. The whole city stunk of stench. It was just crap. And the horses lived with all the crap. Well, Hercules was always given these jobs that he had to do to prove himself. Okay? And this time he was asked to clean out these stables. So he goes to see King Augeas, and he's like, look, I need to clean out your dirty ass stables because you're a pig. And King Augeas was very weary, as many people are when Saturn comes a knocking. And he's like, what do you mean? What do you want from me? You want part of my kingdom? And he's like, no, I just want to clean out the crap from your kingdom. It's disgusting. People are dying and they're dropping dead from the smell. And he's like, well, if you clean it out, I'll give you part of my kingdom. And Hercules is like, I don't want part of your kingdom. I just want to clean out the stables. He's like, no, I don't trust you. I'm going to give you part of my kingdom. So Hercules sees these rivers, and he realizes that if he makes holes in the stables, that the rivers will come through the stables, and he'll clean out all the trash. So that's what he does. He makes holes in the stables, and the two rivers intersect the stables, and all the trash starts to go, I mean, not very clean, but at least he starts cleaning out the stables from the city, and at least, you know, people aren't dropping dead anymore. Well, King Augeas is like, that's a cheat. You cheated me, you're stealing my, and he's like, look, I'm not cheating you. I need to clean out your stables. There's too much trash, and I don't want your kingdom. I just wanted to clean out the stables. That's what in essence happens. The trash piles up so high. The crap of your life that you can't run from piles up so high that eventually things in your life you cannot run from anymore. It just starts collapsing and you have no choice but to confront it. So you can run so much, and this happens like with addicts. This happens with like people that run from their problems or drink or smoke or gamble or cheat or whatever it is that they do to, you know, run away from their problems. But eventually at the 28 to 30 year mark, they're confronted. And in your case, you weren't running, but you found your father. So it also works in your favor when you quote unquote want to find, you know, answers. So that's why your father, you earned it, so to speak. You got answers right at that 28, 30. So that was your Saturn. That's what's called a Saturn return. And you come full circle, and you get up to 3 of these in a lifetime. I mean, people don't live up to 130, that's why.
One's enough.
So you get 28 to 30, you get 58 to 60, and you get, what did I say, 88 to 90. And it's different levels. Usually at 28 to 30, it has to do with a responsibility. A job, has to do with a family, you have a baby, careful, you buy a house, some sort of thing like that. At 58 to 60, it usually has to do with grandkids or retirement or something to do with later on in life. And at 88 to 90, it usually has to do with death, like real physical death. Okay? That's mine. Oh, okay. So that's why I started with the moon, so you could see that the microcosm of the moon is the same thing that happens. But now we have to talk about the 14 years at the 14-year mark. Do you remember what I said about the full moon, the 14-day? What I said what happened? So this is the new moon. And 14, you get the answer, but what happens at the full moon? Someone is against you or opposing you. At 14 years old, what happens?
You're going through puberty.
You're going through puberty, you hate your parents, and you're rebellious. Okay? This is probably the biggest death that you have as a child. It is the death of your childhood. You are no longer a child, you are now entering adulthood. Okay? So this is huge. Who are you opposed to?
I'm guessing your parents.
Your parents. Your parents are your biggest opposition. This is huge. So now at 7 years old, you've left your parents and you've gone into your teacher. Your teachers, your friends have become your friends. And you're kind of figuring out your identity, your personality is formed at 7. At 14, you look at your parents and they are evil. They are Satan. And you're like, ah! It's the same exact opposition as you have at the full moon. It's at 14 years old, you want nothing to do with your parents. It's also when you're in puberty, it's also when you can become sexually active. When you become sexually active, you are considered officially an adult, biologically, okay? So, this means if you're an adult, it's the official death of being a child. So this is an extremely important age. So now, go to your door that has 14, and with your non-dominant hand, close your eyes. And put your hand over your 14. And I want you, the first memory that comes up of you arguing with your parents. What were you arguing about? What happened? What was the fight about? And when you have that, write it down. Where'd you get it?
I argued with my fake dad. I don't know what to call him anymore.
Okay, that is okay.
I was always out with my friends. We would play basketball, we would play football, I mean, listen to music. They were all into smoking weed. I wasn't.
Your friends, you mean?
My friends, yeah. Of course, I would smell like it if I was around them or not. So I came home one day and he said, "Oh, you're doing drugs, you're doing drugs." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I was actually just playing basketball. I was trying to show off that short people can make shots and I could never make the shot, so." But I was trying to be cool. Yeah, it was an epic fail. But he accused me. He was like so relentless that I was doing drugs. So I said, "Well, I know you do. So when you get a drug test, I'll get a drug test. We can do one together. I'm gonna pass, you're gonna fail." I did tell him that. I mean, I got my ass beat for it.
Okay, there we go.
But yeah, I did get my ass beat for it.
Shit, I
but
would have
knew
been
it
home
was-
somewhere.
But I knew it was true, and it hurt me that he accused me of doing something that he was doing, and I had the better say to be like, "No, I don't want to do it."
Okay. Anyone else?
I had this thing with my hair where I used to love doing different stuff. I started off with, dreads. Then as the older you get, the phase kicks in, and I would shave my head. Then my dad got real mad because I started dyeing my hair color. And, at first I did the simple colors, brown, little highlights. Then I went above and beyond. I was doing blue, orange, and he looked at me, he was going crazy. He was like, "Why in the hell are you, changing your hair color?" And it's like, I shaved my head more than once. I changed the format of it. Why are you upset? And he was like, "Well, you're a little girl, you should not be doing stuff." And I was like, again, you approved everything else. What is wrong with my hair? He was like, "No, stop trying to mock me. I'm right and you're wrong." And it's like, again. It's just a hair color. Which is.
Your phone.
It's
It's vibrating or something.
silent.
Oh, my
You're
apologies.
it back, give it back. He was so lost. in
It's
it.
just like your face expression. You like, what happened?
That's what I was like. He was like,
So what is the common thread between your two stories?
They think they're always right, and we know we didn't do anything wrong. We were just.
Rebellion.
but who though? The parent or the child in this case?
And you're the child, so you're the rebellion.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's the rebellion of the child because they're trying to exert their adulthood. At 14 is when the adulthood begins. And this is when we start seeing that children start alienating themselves from their parents. This is why parents start complaining, oh my God, my child this, my child that. This is a natural process. It is exactly what is supposed to happen. It is the opposition. It's the exact opposition, as I said here, that is supposed to happen from the child to the adult so that the child can become their own independent person, become their own individual person. If the child does not do this, if the child does not detach from the parent, does not die as a child, so to speak, then what will happen? What will he cease to have?
If the child does not die from the parent,
Yeah, and does not form his own adulthood, what
or
will he
doesn't
cease to
a
have?
life and death.
Think of Erickson.
Erickson, he'll be stuck because he won't be able to find himself.
Exactly, he won't have his own identity.
Oh,
He won't have his own identity. And so this is an absolutely natural process and necessary process that is needed. Sex is just one of those. Hair color is one example. Going out with your friends and being rebellious is one of those examples. Now, ironically, in astrology, Saturn represents the father. Now, why does Saturn represent the father? It happens to be that both of you had a story that represented the father. It's not the father, it has to do with authority. Has to do with authority. Does anyone know the story of Saturn? Okay, I'm going to share it with you. In astrology, Saturn is also known as Chronos. And I've talked about Chronos before. Chronos means time, or father time. What is the thing that makes us die?
Time.
Time, okay? We are held to the clock. The moment we're born, we're already on our way to death. So Saturn is Chronos' time, his father time is death. Or that book. So Saturn was dethroned by his kids, Jupiter.
he had a good relationship with his grandson.
Yes, he had a good relationship with Uranus. No, Uranus was his father. He had a good relationship with, no. Yeah, his father was Uranus. Uranus was castrated by Saturn, and Saturn was dethroned by Jupiter. Okay? So what happened is that there is, in mythology, in our psyche, evolution-wise, in our psyche, that our children will dethrone us. What happens if our children dethrone us?
They take their own control.
They take their own control, they kick us out of power. We don't want that. Although we say we do, we don't. That is why the authority figure fights and fights and fights and says, no, you won't, and they punish you, and they say you can't do this, and your mother acts the way she does, and Stacy's father doesn't want her to dye her hair, and your father doesn't want you to smoke or be with your friends. and my parents kept me practically in prison, and all the things that our parents do. Because subconsciously there is a fear that we're going to be dethroned, and they are going to be thrown. They have to be dethroned. Because if not, the child will stay a child. There will be no more adulthood to perpetuate the species. These children must become adults.